Alrighty.
Welcome back, everybody. We got everyone online who should be online.
Correct.
Are we recording?
Correct. We are recording.
Thank you. So we're going to go to item 4.1. And Donna is here to present. Councillors have gone through. Essentially, all we're doing here is receiving correspondence and financial statements. Could I get a mover and a seconder to receive this motion, please? Don Grant and Billy. Donna, is anything that you want to add?
Not particularly. This is, as you can see, this is Privilege Water Limited's financial statements for the last 2 financial years. Really, there's not, there's not a lot of transactions on there at the moment because obviously they're not operating. They're still in the stage of development. So the revenue really is just from investment revenue, from the money that they have drawn down from the Crown.
But this is information only, isn't it? This is further another item.
This report is information. The only other thing in the resolution is for approving me to sign as your shareholders representative to sign these minutes to say that that has been through them.
Right, thank you. So, are there any questions?
So the audit was signed off in November and it's May that's coming to us. Is that, would we normally expect to have got this in January or something?
So I don't know what it was. The audit did drag on a bit. And we haven't long received this. So by the time there's probably a bit of process that they have to go through between signing off their audit and then having their AGM as well, which is when this report and their audit report is presented to the board. And so from there, then it will come to the shareholders once that's happened. So that's probably why we've seen that delay.
So we're receiving the correspondence and we're approving Donna to sign the minutes. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you, Kerry. All right. Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that. Item 4.2, adoption of the proposed Waikato Triennial Agreement. This is pretty straightforward standard stuff and it's part of the Waikato Mayoral Forum. What the Mayoral Forum has done is broken up into the required structure, and then the work program will be separated out and will be managed by the Mayoral Forum at their meetings that are coming up. The one that was due to be here on the 22nd of May has now been moved to Hamilton because there is another meeting that's been organised for the mayors involved directly afterwards. So we will now be hosting the July meeting of the Waikato Mayoral Forum here. So this is a legal requirement under the Local Government Act. All we're doing is signing off on the agreement and the work that the Waikato Mayoral Forum does will be happening as those meetings progress. So can I ask if there's any? Yeah.
I'm just concerned that part of that has got draft through it, that document. Through the principles, page 301 of the packet.
So,
and others.
okay, so what I think, now, and I'm not 100% sure on this, what I think happens with this is that these are retained as a draft because they go from the Waikato Mayoral Forum out to individual councils to be considered, and once all the councils have signed off on them, then they go into the final document. So I think they remain as a draft until that has happened.
So to extrapolate that train of thought, then if there was something in there that we didn't agree with, and I'm not suggesting we had a huge debate, because I've actually read through it and it was fine to me. We would have to make a note of that and send it through.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Yeah, so this has to go through 11 councils and be agreed by all of them. So if we disagree with it, we'll have to go back to the mayoral forum for another consideration.
Yeah.
And then another endorsement and then go back to 11 councils.
And we should have, and it's not our fault, but we should have signed off on this, I think, in March.
Yes, there is a March deadline, but that has just been amended out till July or August or September by the legislation. Obviously not aimed at this region, obviously that's aimed at the Hawke's Bay region, but it also applies to this region, or at least to us anyway.
So, sorry.
For a whole bunch of questions, I'm only.
So the key elements of this is a couple of things. First of all, that I think the basic structure of this document that you're seeing here is picked up from the previous agreement and used as a framework to get this started. The other thing is the allocation of the admin function, which is CoLab. There's a table there of share of it.
You happy with that?
Well, what is missing from there is the fact that it, because it's deliberately been left open as a framework, that the amount is $10,000. So our share of that would be $810. But as the work progresses, that might change, and if it does change, in terms of the amount committed, that'll come back to council for another look. And at the last mayoral forum presentation by Biennial Group down south, where was it, Canterbury? And they have progressed their work to another level where I think they've got quite an extensive range of work going on. Whether we progress into that role or not as a regional, we don't know. It's
So just to explain it, Len is saying more work will go through CoLab. Is that what you're saying?
they are just the admin.
Only admin only.
That's
They don't do any other functions.
No, it's just admin. So all of the work in terms of priorities and scope of work that the mayoral forum wants to tackle is decided at the mayoral forum. They'll do a draft, bring it back to the individual councils. As long as councils are happy with it, then that's good with it. It's a bit of a long-winded process, but it's so in terms of our commitment at the moment, $810. Just think manageable. Any further questions on that? You'll see a bit more of this as we go through next slide.
Do the chief executives join the mayoral forum? They used to, are they still?
The chief executives are the advisors to the mayoral forum. So the chief executives also get together and look at what joint work we might do, and then take that back to the mayoral forum. The mayoral forum consider and endorse before it goes to individual councils to agree.
Right.
It's quite a long-winded process.
There's a little bit of an opportunity for us here, because if we look at the scope of work that the mayoral forum has done in the past, it's all fairly general, but there is an opportunity here for us as a council, as we're in recovery mode and as we're looking to get the support of the other mayors in the region for some of the recovery work that we're doing, particularly around roading, that we can engage with them and develop those relationships to get their support on what we're trying to do in that recovery space. And with those connections and as we've talked about before, the opportunities for joint promotion in Hauraki, Matamata Piato, for example.
Okay.
It sits there as an opportunity rather than something that's fully developed.
Yeah.
All right. Any further questions or discussions? Put the motion, second.
You get one, please.
Yes, we'll get a mover and a second to receive it, please. Terry and Martin, all those in favour?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay. Item 4.3, community board terms of reference. So Donna, you've helped us through this.
Thank you, Marion.
So I'll get a mover and a seconder to receive this, please. Mover and a seconder to receive, John and Robin, thank you. Donna, did you have any updates for us on this?
So no, I don't have any further updates than what we have, than what I have written in the report. Just as a refresher, that we brought the community board terms of reference to the last council meeting. At that point, a resolution was made to go out to the board chairs to get their feedback. So and have that feedback back by the 26th of April. Unfortunately, it didn't give time for it to go through another round of community board meetings, so which is why we kind of had to get that through. We normally this community board terms of reference should really have been adopted or done, quite a while ago, sort of as soon as possible after the beginning of the triennium. So we are quite delayed with this. So that was the purpose of going back to the community board chairs, so that if they had any concerns, they could take it to their boards offline basically, and then bring their feedback back to me. Any concerns? So we heard back from Coromandel and Mercury Bay.
Just those two.
Yes.
So I just saying clarification there, that the community board chair rang me and said that he read that and then said, we actually made our points quite clear at the induction on this when these notes were taken at that meeting. That was on the 3rd of April. And so they didn't need to clarify anything more than that. So while they said that was in the actual minutes, they'd made their points clear and wanted them to be considered. So they didn't need to respond again. They'd already made those points at that meeting. And that was the chairman notes at that meeting that was held here with those chair people.
Terry, which community board?
No,
Yeah.
this is the
What Councillor Walker is referring to is a community board chair training.
training, yeah.
Yeah.
And that training session, they
It was
made it
not a
clear,
full meeting.
and it's noted in here that they're their points.
Yeah.
Just made that clear that that's why they didn't respond to that one, because they felt they'd already responded.
So this, sorry, thank you, Councillor Walker. Gary, you have a question?
Yes, I'm just, I don't know if you can answer this, Donna, but what's brought about this sort of re-looking at the way the community boards operate? I've had one term with them and I thought they've operated pretty well. Is it been that it's considered that it costs too much operating the way they were operating? I'm just at a bit of a loss to know why this is all happening.
I was going to answer it. So through the chair, every time you need to relook at the community board terms of reference, and then we make any recommendations, updates to them to bring back. We're not actually recommending that we're changing anything much about how the community boards operate. With this terms of reference, we've just made it, so we've just changed some of the wording up to make it clearer of what the responsibilities are for the community board and for council, and how that will work. Overall, there hasn't been any significant changes as such to the terms of reference or how they operate, how we expect it to operate.
Yes, well, we've got standing orders, of course, which have been strengthened to have the role of the community board chair. And I have to say, I repeat like a broken record since I became an elected member. The fact that councillors are on community boards seems to be a conflict situation. And if we're going to get challenged on something, I think we've really got to be very careful. So they are an entity to themselves, and it's good to go and listen and hear what they're saying, but it's their decision. And then ultimately we can reaffirm or not reaffirm. And that's, I think, the principle and basis of community boards and their small independence that they have.
Thank you, Gary. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Robin?
Hi, Donna. Very similar to a question I've asked on another matter earlier. So you've changed the draft to read chief executive or delegate, and that was in response to the Mercury Bay Community Board suggesting that it would be useful to have a delegate in the case of Aileen being unwell, which we don't wish on her, or on an overseas holiday, which we do. But the chief executive in either of those situations would have somebody stepping in and acting as chief executive. So is the word or delegate actually necessary? Because it would just be a function of the acting chief executive to do the job of the chief executive in one of those situations. So it feels a bit redundant to me. Unless you can imagine a different situation where the chief executive would delegate those responsibilities to somebody else as an ordinary.
The only other situation I could probably think of, and it still would kind of be all delegate, is the chief executive was absent and it was sudden and there was no formal delegation. I think there's something I've seen in a policy that says that who would step in that. Those circumstances.
I won't die in a ditch over whether it's in there or not. I just wonder if it's necessary.
Just a little bit of confusion. So in the original terms of reference, it always had the word or delegate in there. What happened? So then to align it better to standing orders, we changed it so that it would read exactly as the standing orders said, which didn't have the word or delegate in there. But we thought that to try and align it to the two, we put the or delegate word back in, and then of course we got the feedback from Mercury Bay suggesting the same thing as well. So yeah, that was just trying to probably align the two, the difference between the original one and then the standing orders.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions, Peter?
I've got just two questions. One is, why do we hardwire into it 20,000? Why isn't it not just to a maximum as determined by council or something like that?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, under discretionary funds.
Discretionary fund.
Is that an annual plan question?
It could think we very specific rather than giving general.
So my understanding was that the discretionary fund was brought about through an LTP process.
Yeah.
And that was what it was. It was 20,000 or up to a maximum of 20,000. That, that was, I guess, refreshed every LTP, a decision of council. So we're really just aligning that. So it's always been up to a maximum of 20,000. That's ultimately a council decision during the LTP process if they want to change that.
So we could revisit that at LTP, but we don't have that ability outside of LTP.
Yeah, so I think my question is not about the 20,000 and where the fact is in here it's designated 20,000, and if at a different process we change that to 25,000, then suddenly you've got to go back and change this document. Whereas if you leave it as generic, how that 20,000 is arrived at through the LTP or whatever it is. So that's my first comment.
Sorry, Peter, can we just address that specifically? Because I think it's a really good point. Is that something that we need to address? Because if we change that at LTP, does it trigger us having to go back to the terms of preference, especially if we've got a different amount? Where does that leave us?
The other option is that we could change the wording to not have a dollar amount in it, to say that it's whatever is set as per the LTP. I think the reason why it was in there to begin with is to make it clear that that's what the
Number was.
the number was, discretionary fund, to actually have it in the terms of reference. So you could go either way with that.
It was there just in case they needed it, which is often used. But at the end of the year, that was it. It was gone. So they started again the next year. So there was no carryover of that money.
Is there some alternative wording that can be put in there to address that?
Not spent, not rolled over.
Would it,
Sorry,
and would it necessarily be through the long-term plan, because potentially that could change in an annual plan as well,
Yes.
as set by council through annual plan or long-term plan.
It's an LTP. So
But we're going to be making that decision as part of our annual plan stuff.
we are, it's on.
Tomorrow,
it's on the
Wednesday,
annual
Thursday.
plan agenda.
But through the chair, ultimately it is a council decision. The way that the discretionary fund has been budgeted in the past was through an LTP process.
Does it leave us with a conflict if we've got that in there of 20,000 in the terms of reference and a different number in the annual plan or the LTP? Are we conflicted there?
I think if it was up to a maximum, if it was anything under, that would be fine. It's probably if it went over that, then we would need to update the terms of reference as well to make sure that the two documents align.
So then the options that we have are the discretionary fund and the contestable funds, but we're really looking at those as to which is the
I think
best way to.
so through the chair, what I would recommend is that if you were looking at raising the discretionary fund to more than 20,000, that you would, I would suggest that you request staff to come back with a report on the usage of the discretionary fund. So to give you some context on how it's used and how much it's used and whether it's used each year as well, before you would consider raising it.
I'm just concerned.
So
that
I get what Donna's saying, that you're saying that this is a measure to ensure prudence. And if it goes higher than this, we want to do a bunch of other instruments to manage that prudence that we currently don't have.
That's right.
I'm just concerned that we don't end up in a conflict between what's in there and what's, are we at risk of that?
We could just, well, if council wanted to, we could just have it saying the amount will be set by council per community board area. Per annum, blah, 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 at the long-term plan or annual plan process. We could say that should take the amount out if we wanted to.
I'll vote for that.
Would that give us more flexibility and then not lock us into something that we then, because we only look at the terms of reference every triennial.
So I guess what I'm hearing is, yes, it's okay to change it, but we then have to remember to change it in the LTP, the annual plan. We then have to come up with what Don's suggesting, a little bit more checks and balances to make sure that we're a prudent manager of finances. This was a sort of the line of protection.
Can I ask why we're doing this? What's wrong with the plan?
We're required to every training. Look at
Yeah, look at the long-term plan period, look at the thing.
the terms of reference.
Okay.
So we're running a bit late.
Yeah, ideally we would have.
But this discussion around it, if we get it. So to take 20,000, to take that out is a departure from the previous.
So if the question that Peter's raised, I think it's a good one, is are we locked into that 20,000 and does it remove any flexibility that we might have? And if it does, are we comfortable with it that it serves a purpose? Because we do have contestable funds which are also in the annual plan, which we do have some flexibility around.
Well, they're by application, it's like community board's discretion, so they're a different deal.
And it doesn't go away, it's just that the maximum amount is set there.
And I mean, taking up your point about prudence, I still think there would be prudence within that annual plan. And if a community board tried to spend more than what discretionary than what they had, then staff would be going, you don't have that money. So I still think, it seems to me, there's still that level of prudence and protection.
Through the chair, it would still be captured in a budgeting process with the annual plan or LTP.
Does that satisfy our need for
Well,
it's in the annual plan?
It's council's fault, but what I'm saying is that when we do take that action to bump it up, someone at that stage is going, hang on a minute, we need some checks and balances around this. We need to then come up with a policy document to support that decision.
Given our fiscal straits at the moment and the fact that we don't want big rate rises, any big, what they are, why don't we just leave it alone, because it's up to 20,000. It gives us room to negotiate it down and just look at it again when times are better.
So we've got Gary with his hand.
Gary? And I will come to you, Adrian, I'm aware that you've, yeah, so I will come. Gary Gottlieb?
You're on mute, Gary.
Can't hear you.
I do that so you won't hear me coughing. Sorry. I've been looking through the bits of legislation referred to in the report, and there's a number of provisions. Can you assist me? Which is the actual provision you say we are bound to do this every X number of years? Because I can't seem to find it amongst the numbers of the sections mentioned.
Gary, I'm not sure off the top of my head what, if it's legislatively bound to relook at this every year, but it's prudent with any policy or any terms of reference that you have a set cycle where you relook at a document to make sure that it's still fit for purpose. And I think that's what we do with the terms of reference as each triennium goes. Council, I believe, still needs to adopt a terms of reference every 3 years.
But where's the legislation for that? Funnily enough, I happen to be a believer in process, and I think we need to follow that. So where's the legislation? Tell me where it spells that out.
I'd have to get back to you on that one, Gary, because I don't know off the top of my head where it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Peter, and then I'll hear from Adrian as well. Thank you.
And the second thing I just want to say is I would advocate for the change that's been recommended to where council will seek community input into such decisions. And my reason for that is in my previous life on the Thames Community Board, decisions were made by council about property in the Thames area, which the Community Board had no visibility of, and it created quite some consternation amongst the Community Board members who were not council members, that this transaction property was taking place, and just brought up a whole lot of things and thought, hey, why wasn't it discussed with us? So I would advocate for the council being obligated to seek the Community Board input with the relevant Community Board. That's my comment there.
Adrian, did you have the point?
Yes, Your Worship, I just would like a couple of points of clarification. Under Community Board status, number 3 says not a community council. And when you scroll down, the responsibility, in addition to the community board, there's a role the community board is responsible for, and goes on one to 8, I think. But the line that catches my attention and accountable to the council for. So one, you're saying we're not a community, one, that's said we're not a community council. Secondly, we've also become accountable to council for and responsibilities. So either council has some control over us or it doesn't.
Thank you, Adrian. I do want to come back and we need to respond on item 3, which is a proposal from Coromandel Coal Community Board that we replace the word may with will, and Peter's made a comment on that. Can I get some input from staff on the thinking behind and the potential pitfalls in going with a defined process and where that leaves staff, particularly in terms of time?
Through the chair, so I guess it just the concern that we have is it could cause an additional layer of complexity to council in making decisions, and especially around awarding contracts and things. Like if you think about a district contract, where there's a contract that goes over all the local local areas are probably can split like the parks contract, some of those other contracts, which we do actually bring back to community boards. But if we had to discuss everything, bring everything back, then there could be times where it would cause these undue delays and to trying to get the contracts in place. I think it just gives a little bit of flexibility in times in case it's needed. I'm like in any big contracts, you can correct me, Bruce, if I'm wrong, but I went up with the parks contracts that there are opportunities provided to the community board where we're looking at renewing your parks contracts.
So, so through the chair, with the parks being locally funded, yes, there is that process with the parks contract, but obviously with other contracts, such as solid waste or free waters, those are just good contracts, so that's consistent council payments to local council.
So if this was adopted as a will, would that lock us into having to circle back to all fund committee?
To the chair, that sounds like it, but I'm okay, I was,
No, so the way that it's worded, on all district funded contracts for local works and services areas. So that wouldn't impact on the district contracts that were totally district activities.
I think my concern sprung out of the property activity rather than the maintenance
And
activity.
I hear that.
Yeah, so I'm just speaking on behalf of the people, the chair who's concerned about this. So I'm bringing forward his views. So it's their area that they really like the word will, because it means that it's only for input. It's not saying decision making, and it will be only those you think are necessary. These contracts come up for once every 3 years. They're not like a every 3 month thing. They're a period of time between them, and it would be very important to include the committee boards into some discussions that might be pertinent to those discussions. So their desires is to have the will, just passing it on as their request.
Rebecca, sorry. Aileen, did you want to respond specifically?
No, I just wanted to clarify a point with Donna around the property activity, going back to Peter's point. So this is all decisions under the property activity would come back under the will proposal. Yeah, yes, that's right. And that raises a whole host of issues around an extra 6 weeks, right? And it's more than 6 weeks by the time you add the going for recommendation for a decision. And if you remember the surf club, yeah, surf club. Yeah, so we took a lot of heat because that could have been signed off the day that thing arrived in the council, which would have then allowed them to do fundraising and so on, but they missed the funding dates because we had to take it through a cycle of the community board, and then we had to bring it back to council for final decision. So there's an extra 12 weeks for them to get the approval they needed, that would have then allowed them access into that funding round. And remember some of the heat we took. So by running with the property activity and will, that essentially adds 12 weeks to any approval process.
Yeah, but if I can speak to that, I was at the meeting.
Okay, well, that's just an example. So there are things that come through that need urgent approvals, and to have another 12 months built in.
Yeah, but I don't think that was a community board's fault.
Terry, we'll go to record. Please, I want to
respond
keep us online. Come back to you. We will. Record's been waiting, so we will come back to you on that, and then we'll do this process in an orderly fashion. Thank you. Okay.
So just got 2 questions. The first is on page 320. We talk about community board members, including the chairperson, do not have delegated authority to speak to the media and in outside agencies on behalf of the council. Are they able to speak on behalf of the community board? That's my first point that needs clarity.
My understanding is that they do, subject to the authority of the mayor, and but I'd have to check on that. So,
You just might want to clarify that wording,
yes.
because to me it leaves it opened up to the fact that, hello. Okay, so they can speak on behalf of the community board.
Can we get a clarification of what that policy is?
I agree with like, it should be, but it would be on behalf of the division.
Okay, so that was the first point. The second one talks about the liaison manager for the community board area. Is that the area manager or is that another person?
What page are you on, Rika?
Sorry, that's the page, top of page 321. Is that, who is that?
Yeah, I think that's the area.
So I just think we should maybe use
Update.
terminology.
So we're going to, are we clear on that change? We're going to make that change now?
For me, it would make it a heck of a lot clearer.
Rather than liaison manager, area manager for the community?
Just through the chair, probably the only caveat to that is if we end up changing job titles, then we have to change that, whereas on the liaison manager could be it could be the area manager, it could be the district, it could be any of those people. That would be my only caveat on that one.
Liaisons of the
I'm happy to update it.
liaison managers of the Bay and Woolly, isn't it? Or delegated manager, the delegated manager for the community board area? Delhi? Oh, we'll come back to you, Terry.
The quorum, because Adrian noted something about online and one of the other documents I've read about quorum being able to be named us with online members. Does that need to be reflected under the quorum there? It doesn't say anything about absentee members.
So that provision, I think, is only for 12 months, so that provision will disappear. And can I just come back to that point? The challenge for us here is when we make decisions on things like this, we can get them wrong. So that was the purpose of asking for feedback, so that we could actually have these questions ahead of time, so we could give considered responses. So we're just sitting here thinking about that liaison manager thing. I think we could easily agree to something and then go away and 2 hours later go, oh, hang on, that didn't work because.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure how to take that forward. Do you want us to bring this back again in the next meeting? And consider some of those points? Break for 5 minutes so we can just.
Maybe revisit it after lunch?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's your call.
So I'm just, look, there's a couple of things. First of all, I need to be clear about our timelines and what our requirements are. So when this was supposed to be signed off before Christmas, we got storms and events in the way, so we're behind the 8 on this. We need to get it done today, but I'm happy to put it till after lunch until we get these. Is there anything else that needs to be addressed in there that hasn't already been addressed by the feedback from the community board chairs? John.
Can I just add that I don't think any of these things that have been mentioned are absolutely material. Well, they're good ideas and worth consideration. Maybe they can just be noted for the next review to allow us just to progress and move through it just as a.
So, John, you're right, except the difference between will and may is a major. That's a critical one. And I think what we need as council, we need staff to be really, really clear with us of the implications between those two words.
Yeah.
Because if the difference of one word is going to push our process back 12 weeks, and I will ask Terry to speak to that because there's some more information on it. But if that's going to push our process back 12 weeks, then that one word is correct. So, Terry, do you want to just?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the Whangamata Surf Club actually wrote a letter to the board, really concerned about the action going on over their request for land in Whangarei. we never had a meeting for it. We only had one meeting for it, and that's why we felt important that we should have been part of that discussion, because they were talking to the board members about what they wanted there with a piece of land and how they wanted to be kept it for their carnival events. Staff came back after that period of time and they didn't bring it to the first community board meeting and brought it to the second one and said that they would not approve that piece of land. So we were in discussion and we supported that with the council, but we only had the one meeting on it and that meeting went back. And then, so we weren't involved with that 12 weeks discussion. We only brought one meeting of discussion and a letter from the Wamata Surf Club saying what the hell's going on had nothing to do with the board's recommendation. They looked at that at one meeting, made a decision and moved on. So that's where property does come into it, because this is an interesting situation where there was part of that that was decided to be part of their property. They moved the footpath alignment across so they could realign it, but the actual piece around the side where they wanted the carnival space was parking was not allowed.
Doesn't that support the argument that we need to have flexibility in there to move things through the process?
Well, there was flexibility to set the community board looked at it, evaluated at that meeting and made a decision. But they were concerned that all the discussion had on prior to that, they had no information about what was going on. It was the surf club coming to the community board members and saying, what the hell is going on? Where's this happening?
So I think we're getting down into.
But I'm just saying that there's a process with property and a decision made caused some issues in terms of process, but it was not the community board with the 12-week wait list.
So I'm comfortable that the discussion we're having is critical because these two words are. So I want to be clear about that, but I think it was not helpful when we get into the level of detail.
What I will say, Leanne, if I can, is yes, I'm surprised that the discussion was happening here today because this is we've been on the council paid agenda once. It's gone back to community boards for their input. Those community boards that chosen to do so have had their input. To me, my community board was actually pretty happy with the paper. It was only that one worked well in May, and I know that went down the ditch over there. Okay, so I'm just interested to get feedback from staff as to what the implications are between using either of those words. But at the end of the day, I know my community will not die in the ditch over.
That's the critical thing, that we get really clear input from staff as to the implications of the difference between these two words in terms of delay, keeping the words and yes, so Aileen, you have some.
I guess that it's taking a council call. At the end of the day, if it says should council staff will exercise their judgment, should it go to the community board or should it just be signed off?
That will if possible.
If it will, it's going to have to go there regardless of the situation.
That will if possible.
How about we just
Offering the word should.
let's just leave it as mine?
May, I'm happy. I can go with May.
I'm ready to put that resolution. We've had a really robust discussion around, and so we're talking specifically on item 3, but let's go through the topic properly. So I'm going to circle back to item 1. So can I get a mover in a second, please, that we receive? So, Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Connell, thank you. Item 2, that we received the feedback from Coromandel, Colville and Mercury Bay. Can I have a mover in a second for that, please?
Yes.
Councillor Sinclair, Councillor Graham, thank you. Item 3, and what we need to decide is whether we accept or decline the Coromandel Colville recommendation that we replace the word may with will.
Or could we use should? I think that's a far more appropriate word than will.
What about it should if possible?
I'm not prepared to accept that as a proposal because this goes back to feedback from community board chairs. And if we're now deciding to change wording from
Trying to work with the group.
chairs, then I think that's unfair on the community board chairs. So this is a proposal from them, and I think we've got to work with them. So the two words are may and will, and the proposal is that we accept or decline. And if we decline it, then we're going with may. If we accept it, then we're replacing may with will. That's what's on the table in front of us.
I'm persuaded by Aileen's argument about how long will take in terms of adding all that extra time. So I'm prepared to move that we decline that motion.
I'll see that.
The motion is that we
Decline
we
the
decline.
recommendation to replace the word may with will.
Okay. Proposed by councillor Sinclair.
Yep.
Seconded by councillor Morrissey. I'm going to put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
2, 3. All those against?
Myself, Gary,
Gary? Okay, abstain? Councillor Grant? So where does it leave us?
For each.
Sorry, what was, sorry.
What was
The numbers
it?
again?
Yes.
Valleys.
So what we're doing now?
We didn't count it properly when we were doing the thing. So are you, do you decline for the decline?
The motion is that we decline Coromandel Coal Community Board's recommendations to replace it with may with will.
That's a down. Okay, yeah, lost it. Just the three of us. Oh.
3. Councillor Connell, you don't look.
It was hard to tell because you had your pen up.
Oh, good.
Sorry. I was like, oh, what are you doing?
Need to pay, put your pen down.
So you're
It's the motion.
okay. So you're
I'm on that
accept
team.
the word in that motion.
Record that. You need to pick a theme.
One abstention. 1, 2, 3.
Scary.
3.
I'll change the thing in favour.
Oh, so now we're for each again. Cool.
Yeah,
All right, I'm going to vote in favour of decline. So the motions have been.
Clarify, I am not in favour of declining. I am voting.
So you're on my team.
Yes.
So you accept that
Oh,
Yes.
Gulliver duck.
council will be required to.
Let's make the change.
Does anybody know what we're talking about right now? I feel like I do, but I'm not sure.
I've lost the will.
Go through that again. So the motion is that council accepts Coromandel Coal Community Board's recommendation to replace the word may with the word will in regard to seeking community board input.
Hang on, no. The one that I moved was that we decline the Coromandel Coal Community Board's recommendation. So that's, I think, what we're voting on.
Right, so we're voting on the motion that councillor Sinclair that we decline. All those in favour of that motion that we decline.
Favour of declining.
Put your hand up.
Put your hand up.
3.
Okay,
All right.
right.
Those against that motion?
my hand is up.
Yes.
Very simple.
Yeah, so the motion has laid.
Your worship,
Yes.
I'd like the motion on the table, please, go with this motion, and then amendment to the current one. I think I can do that over there.
Correct.
Yes, I can. I just need a second. I can speak. So instead of, yes, I can slip in there. What I can do is instead of, accepts or declines the Coromandel Coal Community Boards, which we're now at the accept stage, I would like to substitute the words, should if possible. Now, the reason.
Oh, God.
Now, the reason I speak to that is because it still allows the community board to be consulted and included in the process. This organisation already, and it's not really pursued, or start, already has a reputation for holding up process and for being slow in delivering when dealing with the public. If what the chief executive officer has said is that this could add another 12 weeks to any process that we're putting through council by having to go back to community boards, then I'm all for giving the CEO and this council the opportunity to deal with it expediently. And having those words, should if possible, allows us to take either track.
That's wish-wash with respect.
Let me speak a minute. Instead of using the word will. So it still allows a bit of flexibility instead of tying this council down to 12 weeks. So that's my motion.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that if you're looking for a second.
So we've got a motion to replace the words, sorry, going back to Item 3, that was lost.
Mhm.
Councillor Sinclair's
So, I mean,
lost.
put an amendment.
So we've got an amendment on the table now,
Correct.
which is basically item 3, that
With respect, standing orders, you're just not following standing orders. You had a vote, you lost, and now you're having another go. That's not on. Just look at the standing orders.
You keep your standing orders, Gary,
It's a new resolution.
It doesn't
Sorry,
use
with
a
respect.
this is going to be
and amendment.
I need some guidance on standing.
This is the correct process.
It's
So
a new
it was a
resolution.
motion that has been, it was lost due to the fact they didn't have the numbers.
Yep.
Then now you've been put up another motion, which councillor Morrissey has done.
Okay.
With a seconder.
And he has a seconder.
And as a seconder, so we're following process, we can do it.
Yes, correct.
So the motion is going to be worded the same as it was item 3. And we can do
Replace
that.
the word with
Yeah, so it's a
should
new.
if possible.
Right, so the motion is going to be,
It's amended.
we accept the Colville Coromandel Community Board's recommendation to replace the word may with should, if possible, in regards to total activity.
Sorry, except that wasn't the Coromandel Colville's recommendation.
Okay, so this,
No, their recommendation was to replace may with will.
Oh, true, yeah.
this is now from council. From.
Yeah.
Now the loose ground.
Vote.
No, but we voted against what was, so we must be supporting what they put forward.
There's a
That's
new-
clear as
It's a
day.
new resolution. It's a new resolution from councillor.
It's an amendment. It's an amendment. Sorry.
Well,
Okay.
but it's straight
Put it to the
denied.
vote and then
You put it
I'll
up and
put my
lost,
amendment
so
in.
the other one should have come up for a state.
Let's see how it goes, people.
Put to a vote, let's go.
Let's do a vote.
Lose.
Yep.
Do we hear from Donna?
Harley said it's process.
Through the chair, I don't know whether this provides any clarity or not. But if you look under responsibilities, responsibility number 7 talks about making recommendations to council on new leases, licenses and concessions. It says that the responsible for doing that, however, the expert that we've added in there is that the board chairperson is delegated to make the recommendation to the council on matters that need to be expedited where a decision is required for the next available community board meeting.
If they're urgent,
Yes, if the urgent, but if you
which is
also,
fine.
also,
Right.
Hang on, let Donna speak.
also for councillor Rebel's point about property, number 9 responsibility, you do have a responsibility for making recommendations to council on property, including land and building acquisitions and disposals within the community board area. So this may is only talking, it's not talking about it. It's talking about the property activity as a whole. It's not talking about, you've got a specific recommendation there for, that include land and building acquisitions.
Doesn't say
So
that,
you-
it says district-wide local activities. In the motion, it says the district-wide local activity contracts and property.
Yes, so
activity.
that's,
That's more than just land.
that's a note. So in the actual terms of reference, that's referring to note 1, that's just saying
Doesn't say that.
that council retains decision-making authority associated with existing or new district-wide local activities, maintenance contracts and property activity. Council may seek community board input into those decisions, so that's the final decision. This responsibilities over here talks about the community board's responsibility and how they will be asked to provide input into these things.
So that's what we're asking.
I'm going to adjourn this
Point of order that we've got to.
because I need some clarity around the standing orders and whether we can allow that additional motion. I'm not comfortable that we're in the right environment where we can get that clarity. So I'm going to adjourn this until we can get some advice and bring this back. We can either do 5 minutes or we can do it after lunch.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Can I clarify the question? Do you want to start to answer?
Yes, please. So the question is whether we can add in an additional resolution already got.
Or an
It's
amended.
an amended resolution.
I don't believe that, and this is where we need the clarity, I don't believe that we can amend the resolution that we've already voted on.
We passed,
Well,
we passed a resolution.
Okay, we'll get clarity from the video.
So the advice one is solely on this matter of resolution, not the other issues that have been discussed.
So the issues that Donna brought up about responsibilities, we can add that to the discussion after lunch, but the clarity that we want is on this resolution. Please. And if we don't get clarity and we don't get the process right, then we're at risk of stuffing this up, and I'm not prepared for this.
And also my question about the legal obligation to be doing this.
Thank
Got
you,
that,
Gary.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to break for lunch. Anyway, get some clarity on this and we'll bring this back after lunch. Thank you.